My world shattered when my own son stood in that courtroom and declared me a monster. For 5 long years, I, a 48-year-old architect named David, carried the weight of that betrayal, a scar left by the divorce from my ex-wife, Rebecca. She was 45, and our separation was anything but amicable. The court granted her primary custody of our 3 children, a decision that felt like a brutal injustice, especially since I was the one who had discovered her affair with my former business partner, Daniel. I was and remain convinced that her fight for full custody was never about the children's welfare. It was a calculated move to secure a steady stream of child support. Alimony was a lost cause for her. The evidence of her infidelity, which I'd uncovered through emails left open on our home desktop computer, was irrefutable. Knowing she couldn't win on that front, she masterfully pivoted to a more insidious strategy, turning our eldest, Jacob, against me. Jacob was 16 at the time of the divorce proceedings, old enough for a family court judge to seriously consider his testimony. He was my firstborn, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to build his first model airplane. And yet, he stood before the judge and painted a picture of me as a volatile, emotionally abusive man who created a climate of fear in our home. He claimed I had uncontrollable rages that made him and his younger siblings feel unsafe, and that limiting my access to them was the only logical solution. Every word was a lie, a carefully constructed fiction fed to him by his mother. But to the court, his words were the devastating testimony of a frightened teenager. The judge's ruling was a gut punch. Rebecca was awarded primary custody. I was initially granted only supervised visitation, a humiliating ordeal where I had to interact with my own children under the watchful eye of a stranger, as if I were a predator. I was also ordered to undergo mandatory anger management counseling. After completing the course, I was allowed unsupervised visits. But the damage was done. During those early, painful visits, I mostly saw my 2 younger children, Liam, who was 9, and Sophia, who was 7. They were confused, often cried when I had to leave, their small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. Jacob, however, refused to see me. Even after the supervision requirement was lifted, he never showed up. He had excised me from his life completely. Now, Liam is 14 and Sophia is 12. Our relationship has been a slow, careful rebuild, conducted during my designated weekends. Over the past few months, during these visits, they've started to share snippets of tension from their home life. They mentioned that Jacob, now 21 and home from university on breaks, had been arguing frequently and intensely with Rebecca. According to them, Jacob seemed perpetually stressed and withdrawn, often retreating to his old bedroom after these confrontations. This was baffling. Jacob had always been Rebecca's golden child, her unwavering ally. After the divorce, he cut all contact with me, never offering an explanation or showing a flicker of remorse for his role in the custody battle. I always suspected Rebecca's manipulation, but the specifics of her poison remained a mystery to me. Then, last Saturday, something shifted. I was parked in the driveway of Rebecca and Daniel's house, waiting for Liam and Sophia to come out for our weekend, as was our routine, to avoid any direct interaction. To my utter astonishment, Jacob walked out with them. He usually made himself scarce, hiding upstairs when I arrived. He approached my car, his posture tense, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Dad," he said, his voice low, I need to talk to you. It's important." I was stunned into silence for a moment, staring at this young man who was once my little boy. Then a cold wave of resentment washed over me. The memory of his voice in that courtroom, the years of lost time, the humiliation, it all surged back. "I have nothing to say to you," I said, my tone flat and final. I told the kids to get in the car, and we drove off, leaving Jacob standing alone in the driveway. I spent the weekend with Liam and Sophia, pushing the encounter to the back of my mind, focusing on the joy of being with them. But when I returned them home, Jacob was waiting again. He stepped forward as I pulled up, but I ignored him, my gaze fixed straight ahead as I waved goodbye to the younger two and drove away without a word. The attempts at communication didn't stop there. He started calling me. He had my number. It hadn't changed in over a decade, and he had never once used it. Now, my phone buzzed with his calls and text messages, all variations of, "We need to talk. It's urgent." For 2 days, I resisted, the old wounds throbbing with every notification. Finally, driven by a potent mix of curiosity and a faint, stubborn flicker of hope, I relented. I agreed to meet him at my apartment. He arrived precisely on time, looking older and more serious than I remembered. The moment he stepped inside, the words tumbled out of him in a rushed, desperate apology. He told me he had made the biggest mistake of his life, that he had completely misunderstood me, and that he was profoundly, genuinely sorry. The raw remorse in his eyes was disarming. Confused and wary, I asked him to explain. What had she told him back then? And what had changed his mind now? For context, Rebecca had blindsided me with the divorce papers. She admitted the affair with Daniel almost casually, as if it were a minor footnote, and presented the dissolution of our marriage as a foregone conclusion. I, reeling from betrayal, had actually tried to save our marriage initially, pleading with her to consider our family. She refused, stating bluntly that she wanted a future with Daniel. After a few days of wallowing in devastation, a fierce sense of self-preservation kicked in. I decided to fight for my assets, for the home we had built, for everything I felt I deserved after her betrayal. I wanted to shield the children from the ugliness, believing they shouldn't be used as pawns. Rebecca, however, was not pleased with this prospect. She realized she would be left with very little, especially since Daniel's career as a freelance consultant was notoriously unstable. That's when the custody battle ignited in earnest. She saw child support as her only guaranteed financial lifeline. With Liam and Sophia too young to sway the court, she focused her efforts on Jacob. And what efforts they were. According to Jacob, Rebecca had spun an elaborate web of lies. She told him that I had forced her to abandon her doctoral studies in literature when she became pregnant with him. This was a complete fabrication. She had chosen to leave graduate school herself, feeling overwhelmed by the pregnancy and the academic pressure. She claimed I had pressured her into being a stay-at-home mother after we married, when in reality, it had been a mutual decision we believed was best for our newborn son. She told him I saw her only as a vessel for my children, that I had demanded she give me 3 kids, and was pressuring her for a 4th. Another outright lie. Every pregnancy was planned and welcomed by both of us. Rebecca convinced Jacob that I was indifferent to her except when she was carrying my child, and that this emotional neglect had driven her into the arms of Daniel, who supposedly valued her for who she was, not just as a mother. She painted me as a villain obstructing their true love, and claimed I was planning to leave her destitute out of sheer spite. Child support, she argued, was her only means of survival. Jacob, who had always been exceptionally close to his mother, believed every word. He never questioned her narrative. So, when the time came, he testified against me, repeating his mother's lies with the conviction of someone who believed he was speaking the truth. Rebecca and Daniel also systematically isolated him from his grandparents, both mine and hers, because they vehemently disapproved of their actions, and they feared he would learn the truth from them. Jacob never questioned this either. He accepted the isolation as necessary. The catalyst for change came recently when Jacob reconnected with his maternal grandparents after his grandmother suffered a serious stroke. Rebecca and Daniel were furious about this reconnection, and their anger only deepened when his grandparents decided it was time to tell Jacob the truth. They encouraged him to talk to me directly, to hear my side of the story. According to Jacob, this was the source of the months-long arguments with his mother. Rebecca was desperately trying to prevent him from contacting me, a move that, to his now 21-year-old mind, seemed less like protection and more like a frantic attempt to maintain a lie. Convinced he had been used as a pawn, Jacob wanted to make things right. He even suggested we sue Rebecca for the damage she had caused to our relationship and my relationship with my other children. The moment he mentioned legal action, I shut it down. I told him I wanted no part of another court battle. The very thought of lawyers, depositions, and judges filled me with a profound weariness. I'd had my fill of legal drama for a lifetime. He insisted, arguing that his mother deserved consequences for her manipulation, and that he had robbed us of years together. But I stood firm. The only legal action I had any interest in was formally modifying the custody arrangement for Liam and Sophia. Beyond that, I wanted peace. It wasn't about fear. It was about practicality and self-preservation. But Jacob kept pushing, his voice growing more passionate and insistent. My patience, worn thin by years of pain and his sudden, forceful return, finally snapped. I told him I understood he felt guilty, but that he had allowed himself to be manipulated despite knowing me for 16 years before the divorce. He had first-hand experience of my character. I said he had wanted to be his mother's hero then, and now he wanted to be mine. I told him to stop meddling in matters that were no longer his concern, given that he was an adult. There was no custody agreement preventing him from building a relationship with me now. As for his siblings, I would handle that myself. He needed to stop pressuring me into a fight. I didn't want just to assuage his own guilt. He looked as if I'd slapped him. The shock on his face was palpable. He left shortly after, with little more than a quiet, "Okay," and I hadn't heard from him since. In the days that followed, I was left wrestling with my own harshness. Had my festering resentment caused me to cruelly reject a sincere olive branch? Was I the jerk for telling my son to stop trying to play the hero? After a period of intense reflection, I realized I've been allowing the past to dictate the future. My anger at Rebecca and the pain of Jacob's betrayal had hardened into a wall that was now keeping out a potential path to healing. I also hadn't spoken to my former in-laws in quite some time. I decided to reach out to them. They confirmed everything Jacob had said. They had indeed been the ones to encourage him to reach out to me. They explained they hadn't told me beforehand because they didn't want to get my hopes up in case Jacob ultimately chose not to follow through. Knowing how deeply his initial rejection had hurt me, I was profoundly grateful to them. They had testified for me during the original custody hearing, which had created a rift between them and Rebecca, but we had maintained a fragile, distant connection over the years. Life and work had simply caused us to drift apart. Their intervention was a key that unlocked the truth for Jacob, and for that, I will be forever thankful. This new reality also meant I now had a powerful advantage in seeking more time with Liam and Sophia. Before moving forward, I feel I should address my previous attempts at modifying custody. I had tried twice through the proper legal channels in the years following the divorce. Each time, Rebecca fought back viciously. With Jacob grown, Liam and Sophia were her only claim to child support. She and her lawyer were adept at using Jacob's old testimony against me, painting me as unchanged and potentially unstable. My own lawyer had advised me to bide my time and build a stronger, longer record of stable involvement before attempting another costly and likely futile battle. For the last 3 years, I had heeded that advice, focusing on being the best father I could be during my limited time with the kids. Now, with Jacob's revelation, the landscape had shifted dramatically. I decided to reach out to him. After several days of soul-searching, I called him. I told him I was willing to talk again, to properly try and resolve things, and see if we could start rebuilding. He could come over that evening. He informed me he had already returned to his university, which was in a neighboring state, But we agreed to a video call later that night. The call was awkward at first, both of us navigating the unfamiliar territory of a conversation that wasn't fueled by anger or accusation. I told him, clearly and calmly, how deeply disappointed I was after 5 years. He had never once doubted his mother's story. He never once picked up the phone to ask me if any of it was true. I told him that given the loving and supportive father I had always striven to be, I found it incredibly hurtful that he had chosen to believe the worst of me without giving me a chance to defend myself. I also told him that while forgiveness might one day be possible, forgetting what happened was not. That was a reality he would have to accept. He listened without interruption, his expression pained. He acknowledged everything. He admitted there was no excuse for his actions, that he had made a catastrophic error in judgment. He said he truly believed his mother would never lie to him about something so monumental, and he had been convinced I was a masterful deceiver hiding my true nature from the world. Now that he saw the truth, he was desperate to find a way to make amends. Even if I didn't want to pursue legal action, he just wanted a chance to be a better son, to slowly earn back a place in my life, on whatever terms I was comfortable with. After a long, emotionally draining conversation, I told him I needed time to process everything. It was all very sudden, and my feelings were complex and raw. He respected that immediately, saying he would give me all the space I needed, reiterating a profound sorrow for the pain he had caused. Despite his efforts to stay composed, he broke down in tears. Seeing my son, now a young man, weep with such genuine remorse broke something open inside me, and I found myself crying too. The weight of all those lost years, the shared grief, was overwhelming. I am glad we had that talk. It was a painful but necessary step. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive him, but I am willing to try, for both our sakes. A few days after my conversation with Jacob, I decided it was time to confront Rebecca. My goal was clear: to secure a more equitable custody arrangement for Liam and Sophia. I had been planning to broach the subject this year anyway, and Jacob's return to my life provided the leverage I had previously lacked. I called Rebecca and stated that we needed to discuss a formal modification of our custody agreement. As anticipated, she immediately tried to deflect, claiming she was swamped with work and other commitments for the foreseeable future. It was a transparent stalling tactic, one she had used before. This time, I was ready. I informed her that Jacob had spoken to me at length. I told her that if she wanted to avoid a messy, public court battle where I would sue her for damages related to her manipulation, she would meet with me to legally adjust the custody arrangement. I also demanded she cease receiving child support payments. I knew through the kids that she and Daniel had recently started a small but seemingly successful marketing firm. They were no longer the financially strapped couple they had pretended to be for years. I further demanded she begin repaying a portion of the child support I had paid under false pretenses. She could manage it however she saw fit. But if she refused, I would take her to court with Jacob's full support, ready to testify about the coercion and lies. I presented her with a clear choice: cooperate amicably and avoid legal repercussions, which was my preferred route for the sake of everyone's peace, or force us down the difficult, expensive, and public path of litigation. The decision was entirely hers. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When she finally spoke, her tone was completely different, subdued, lacking its usual condescending confidence. She said she needed time to think and to discuss it with Daniel. This was the reaction I had hoped for. I gave her until the end of the week to decide, warning her that if I didn't hear from her, my lawyer would be contacted immediately, and the consequences for her would be far more severe. She became angry then, accusing me of blackmail. I told her I didn't care what she called it. I had spent years trying to maintain a fragile peace for the children's sake, but now I was done. I was determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my money, my peace of mind, and, most importantly, my rightful place in my children's lives. The fear of losing in court again, which had paralyzed me for years, was gone. With Jacob on my side, I felt a confidence I hadn't known was possible. The week passed quickly. The day before my deadline for Rebecca, I had another video call with Jacob. I needed to be absolutely certain he understood the gravity of what testifying would entail. I asked him point blank if he was truly prepared to go into a courtroom and recant his previous testimony, knowing it could open him up to legal scrutiny and certainly cause immense emotional strain and familial fallout. His response was immediate and steadfast. He said that even if he faced personal consequences, it would be for a just cause. What his mother had done was unforgivable. His own actions were a deep regret he had to live with. He admitted openly that he had known he was lying during his original testimony. He was a naturally deceitful person, but he had done it because his mother had asked him to, and he had believed her. He had never personally witnessed any of the behaviors he described under oath. Now, he was ready to do whatever it took to make things right, regardless of the cost of his relationship with his mother or his own comfort. Hearing him say this moved me deeply. It was no longer just about guilt. It was about a genuine commitment to justice and redemption. He was willing to face the fire. Nonetheless, I still hoped Rebecca would see reason and spare us all that ordeal. The following day, I called her for her answer. She didn't pick up. After several attempts, I sent a firm text message stating that ignoring me would not make the problem vanish. A lesson she should have learned by now. She called back shortly after. For the first several minutes, she engaged in pointless small talk and vague meandering, clearly stalling. I cut her off, asking directly if she had an answer or if I should contact my lawyer. After a few more minutes of evasion, she finally, reluctantly, agreed to my terms. Her only condition was that we keep lawyers out of the process entirely. I told her I would agree to that only after she ensured the first repayment was made within the next month. I was not willing to wait. She tried to negotiate, claiming their new business needed time to become profitable before they could start repayments. I was unmoved. I had given her years of my life and a small fortune based on her lies. I felt I owed her no more leniency. I had meticulously calculated the child support payments from the years in question. I strongly suspected she had used that money as seed capital for her business, though I couldn't prove it. My accountant had provided a precise total, and I demanded it back in full. I didn't plan to spend it on myself. I intended to place every penny into a trust fund for Liam and Sophia's future education and needs, but I saw no reason to tell her that. I was being fair, asking only for what was mine, obtained through her deception. I told her to consider my willingness to forego a lawsuit my final act of goodwill. She should be grateful I was offering this path. She continued to try and barter for better terms, but I had reached my limit. I ended the call. I followed up with a text, stating I would not discuss it further. I just expected the payments to begin on schedule. Any delay or default, and I would not hesitate to file a lawsuit. I also informed her that, despite her wish to avoid lawyers, I would be having a formal contract drawn up to document our agreement. I would send it for her signature the following week. These were my non-negotiable terms. I felt no need to be gentle or accommodating. The time for that had long passed. I was done being manipulated by Rebecca and her husband. Several months have passed since that tense agreement. Jacob and I have been diligently, carefully working on our relationship. It is not an easy road. There are days when the memory of the courtroom, the lost years, rises up in me like a bitter tide, and I become distant and withdrawn. Jacob has learned to recognize these moments and gives me the space I need without taking it personally. Afterwards, we find our way back to the conversation. We are making progress, slow and unsteady, but progress nonetheless. I am confident we will continue to heal. Rebecca has, to my surprise, been adhering to the agreement. The payments have been arriving on schedule, and she signed a contract I had drafted, making our arrangement legally binding. I am recovering what I lost financially bit by bit, but that feels almost insignificant compared to what I am regaining: time with my children. Liam and Sophia are now spending nearly half their time with me. Our relationship has blossomed. They are happier, more relaxed, no longer sensing the undercurrent of tension that used to define their lives. I have been scrupulously careful not to speak ill of their mother in their presence. They deserve a childhood free from that burden. I know some might doubt my decision to forgive Jacob, worrying he might revert or that his loyalty is fickle. But as his father, I see the sincerity in his efforts. He was a teenager, a child himself, caught in a maelstrom of adult manipulation. If we are all held eternally accountable for the mistakes we made at 16, the world would be a very unforgiving place. I choose to believe in his redemption and in our capacity to build something new from the ruins of the past. I am happy. I am at peace. The road here was long and painful, but I have emerged on the other side with my family, albeit a reconfigured one, slowly knitting itself back together. The future, for the first time in years, feels full of light